Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about virtual and media production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have Kat Adams and Andy Carluccio here from Zoom, and they're going to be talking about Webinar and some of the new features and answering your questions about that. So it should be a great second hour. And we have Lenny Nelson from New Tech talking about booths tomorrow and shows and trade shows and what it takes to actually make that happen. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming up, but you can find out more again at the schedule on officehours.global. All right, now we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Tim Mann this morning in Melbourne, Australia. And Tim says, lapel or headset options for use in a basketball hall for a hybrid event?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Well, they're different things there. Basketball halls are probably going to be quite reflective. So if you're going to use a headset mic, use something that's pick up less of the room, or you can
And Jesse, we're losing you there. You're breaking up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. How about this? All right. Sorry about that. And basically, well, the players, you might need a pack that's a bit more.
Still breaking up on your end.
Still breaking up. All right.
Yeah.
Pass.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Sound a little bit like Wi-Fi, maybe. So this is one of those circumstances. You have a terrible room because those big square, hard reflective surfaces are one of the most challenging things to enable you to get good sound back. That's why almost every time you see sports reporters on the sidelines and those kind of things, they're wearing a headset with a boom arm that's very specific to that kind of environment. So I'd use the same thing. A lavalier, anything more than an inch away from the corner of your mouth is probably going to be a bad idea. So you could use a headset mic, one of the small headset mics, and it'd probably do the physics of getting your sound of your voice above the sound of the background. But miking and the type of mic too, you want something that's as tight as you can.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I use the Audio-Technica BPHS1. That's a go-to headset for sports and things like that. Even for noisy shows where we used that, I believe it was that model when we did the CES stuff years ago.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that there's actually a sporting event. I think it might be just in a basketball hall. But even then, I would look at a low-profile headset. The biggest problem you're going to have with the basketball hall is going to be hard surfaces, which is the whole floor and everything around you. So I still think that that you could go with something low-profile like a Countryman or a DPA would be probably a good solution for that. You probably don't need to worry about too much of the crowd rejection, but you do have to worry about a lot of the reverberance. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, the password manager I use, 1Password, and he's got a link there, is moving to subscription-only licensing with version 8. What Mac OS password manager would you recommend that is perpetually licensed and supports iCloud?
Go ahead, Taylor.
The one I would recommend, well, there's several I use, but the one I like to use is LastPass. The other one I recommend is Bitwarden. Now, typically, I don't know what you mean by supporting iCloud. Typically, your password manager is stored on an external server. In Bitwarden's case, it can be self-hosted internally. In LastPass's case, it's in the cloud. So I'm not sure what you mean by supported by iCloud, but both LastPass or Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the perpetual license option.
Go ahead, Jason.
Taylor's answer was pretty much perfect. I would say +1 on LastPass. I have no problem paying for password management.
Yeah, I use LastPass as well, and I've used it for over a decade, and so it'd be hard for me to extract myself from it at this point. The one of the big things about LastPass that I like is if you have other people in your organization, you can share that access to a web page or access to something without sharing the actual password. So you can say this person can go find that when they get to the web page, but they can't actually see the password, because handing someone a password isn't just handing them, it's oftentimes handing them the system if you're not using hashes. And once you get used to a password password manager, what I do is I have a very long phrase that I type in that I can remember from my childhood. That's typically the thing you do. Childhood that no one would remember, that it was probably more internal to you. I have a long phrase that gets me into my password, and after that, it's all hashes. So the problem that you have once you get this far into it is that I can't log into anything, almost anything, without LastPass installed because I don't know what it is. Because it's all hashes that are 26 characters long and just a big mesh of things. And that's really where you want to try to get to, and why you need some kind of password manager. Next question.
Mitchell Hill's up next from Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel. Tuesday, NASA fired up the backup thrusters on Voyager 1. It's been over 37 years since the spacecraft was launched. What does that say about the hardware and software created back then?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's very interesting. I know it's usually a little bit off topic, but Voyager 1 is the man's furthest outside of the solar system device that's running. And the backup thrusters are for making course corrections, and they've never been used because they're the backup thrusters. So NASA had to go into the archive to pull out the old assembly language and reprogram how they come on. They just wanted some short bursts. I'm just amazed that something that old could be repurposed when it's outside our solar system. It's amazing.
I don't know if it's still the case, but there were, I think, 1 or 2 people that were on the original Voyager program that literally their only job at NASA was to be the people that still remember how it worked. And so they it was really funny. We had somebody who he was really into film, and he came up and hung out with us and everything else. But he was part of that Voyager crew where he didn't really have a lot to do. Like there was just, but they can't let him go because if he's the only one that remembers where all the little bits of pieces are. So that's what I call some serious job security. So go ahead, Sky.
Again, I'm fascinated as well, Mitchell. The question is early days that they did all of this without all of the small microchips that we're using and so used to today. But I know at one point, one of the systems had no less than 6 redundancies of systems, so that if this thing went out, they could back up. And so that's just amazing engineering.
I mean, some of it's, designed obsolescence in some ways. We make things a lot lighter now because we're going to change them. I mean, there's still some Roman roads out there that were built thousands of years ago. They were built 9 feet thick. It turns out if you build them 9 feet thick, they'll last a long time. It's hard to move them though. It's hard to decide you're going to go somewhere else. And
the railroad tracks are still the same width as the Roman
right.
Roman chariots.
Exactly. Chariots, yep, absolutely.
4 foot 8.5 inches. Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know, Mitchell. I'm a lot older than 37 years old. I'm still working. So
have you fired up your backup thrusters recently?
Just this morning.
Next question.
Moving on to Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, kind of a corollary to Doug's password manager question. Can you run one password and LastPass simultaneously, or for that matter, any group of multiple password managers?
Go ahead, Taylor.
The answer to that question is yes, you can. However, I don't personally recommend it primary reason is because you can have both password managers installed in a plugin on your browser, but you run into the case where there's times when both password managers won't prompt you to save the credentials, or if you tell one to remember it but not the other, then you slowly get the 2 databases out of sync. And then if you go to the one that's out of sync, then all of a sudden you don't have credentials for a website that you need. So I only recommend using one and then pick and stick with that one.
And go, Jason.
That was basically it. They're only in sync when you do an export from one and an import from the other. And after that, they will drift away. So please don't do that.
Yes, I would highly recommend not doing that. You really want to get into a zone of this is where everything works. You'll make everything much harder otherwise. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand's up next. Does anyone have a real-world example of using QLab, it's got the link there, in the real world? As I got an update notification from MacUpdater's app that I forgot I had installed it. It looks pretty cool.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, Victor was the one that really did a lot of QLab stuff when he did his sax jams. So you can check out his videos to see how that worked. And then, of course, ping him to see because you're going to probably do the same type of stuff that he's going to be doing.
Yeah, it's used very heavily in theater and stage. That's because it exactly what it says. It has lots of cues, so it can cue out to external devices. It can receive cues via OSC and a lot of other protocols. So it's not only that it can play video to multiple displays. It can play audio out into multiple channels. It can play, it can activate grab, but it can activate things or receive functions as well. So it's a very, very powerful engine. Sometimes we got into it just because it did play out and we were getting out of Playback Pro. And we found that it was almost too heavy, because it did so many things. But it's a very, very powerful, basically system for live events that can both send and receive commands as well as play out media. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, the drone shots during the office hours space program truly gave you a sense of perspective of the entire event. Which drones did you use, and how were they coordinated with the other elements in the production?
Go ahead, Chris.
So the thing that I found, oh, look, there's drone footage on one of the screens. So one of the things that I was amazed by when we were doing the setup was Keenan said, oh yeah, we'll just use the drones. And I'm like, well, how are you going to get that live signal out? He goes, oh, you just plug it in. I'm like, I didn't know I literally didn't know what he was talking about. But apparently some of the drones, the Mavics we used, have a more high-endy controller that actually has HDMI out. So you go through that and you do some adapters and cables, whatever, and it gets into the switcher package. So that's how we actually got it in. I totally agree. One of my favorite bits of the whole thing, directing it, was the drone footage. We had 2 of them. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most, I hate to say it, but is the 15 minutes before we went live. And all we did was, I think in the script, what did we call it, Sky? We called it the drone dance or the drone porn or something. It was just
the dance of the drones.
Drone, and go to another drone and then another drone and a drone. And it really, the expanse of that lake bed was intoxicating. And to see that, we had worked so hard to bring all this gear and all these people and build this big camp. And then you get a wide shot and you're like, oh, we're like a little pimple on the back of this lake bed. And in terms of coordinating, the number one thing, and this is directing 101, you just got to make sure that you can see everything at once. And if you can see everything at once, you have the choices of what you want to look at. But the drone guys, all people being voluntold to do this, it was Chris Widener and Jack Blair were the drone pilots. Keenan was going to be one of the pilots, but Jack stepped in at the last minute. It was so fun.
Sky.
Yes. And the perspective of that big, massive vista, it does. I love how you actually pointed that out, Douglas, that perspective is what we were hoping for. But the concept is, you'll see that in movies. It allows your audience to see in relationship where your heroes are and what they're up against or what their environment is. And so that Chris used it regularly was brilliant. But more importantly, that both Chris Widener and Jack understood the limitations of their systems, and they had batteries ready, but they would often offset which one would go up at what point, so that they knew at any point, because we had no schedule. We were live. We didn't know what was happening next, so that they were smart enough to know that somebody had to come down when the other one's going up. Also, the bandwidth that they understood. I love Chris's techie, clicky, buttony terminology, but they knew what all those buttons and clickies meant and how to use them. And then the last thing was, they went way out to give us that wide thing. So they, I think, went to the end of their RF signal, and
it also helped that because we were under a dome of FAA clearance.
Yeah.
Those drones I think are limited to what 400 feet that you can go up or something. Yeah, not ours. We go as high as we wanted. We could go as high as the drone could go, because we were cleared to 15,000, and they don't go that high, that I know of.
How high did you go?
I think they only went to about 12 or 1,300 feet, but it totally helps in terms of giving you the expanse of it, and then also the distance that they could go away and then just see this little. It was,
and then the day before that, we could actually also practice. And so they were up there practicing with other rockets that had been launching. So they had their opportunity. But again, each of them were independent of everybody else doing their own thing. So that they gave that specialty to us was a huge gift.
It's crazy when you start to see, when people really get into this for coverage, having 2 makes a huge difference. I've worked on ones where we have 4. and each one of them I think was spaced. The landing,
Of course you have.
the landing pad, the landing pads were 3 feet by 3 feet, and then they were 10 feet apart. And they would set them down, and then they had this stack of batteries. And as one took off, the other one, we would hit land on the other one, or we didn't hit it, someone else hit it, and the other one would come in and land and be swapped out again. They'd pull the memory card out, they put the thing in, then they'd send it off again. And there was like these pilots just sitting there with all these things flying over, and there was 2 in the air all the time, and they just kept on swapping batteries. And it was like this amazing dance, as you said, dance of the drones, of these drones covering big sporting event. And before we weren't allowed to do any of those things.
Well, and then again, I will say, Bill Davis also brought an amazing gift with his little handy cam on his bicycle, which just gave us almost a lower flyby, which was much safer when you're dealing with rockets. So it was good.
I will say drones are some of the funnest little toys, and they look great on golf courses going really, really right along the fairway, just in case.
But again, it's the parallax. You have to have something in front that shows the movement. So you don't need a lot, but you need a little.
Yeah, Mitchell.
I don't recall saying, sorry for asking a question, but did you guys get the money shot, the overhead shot of the rocket taking off? Because I visualized it with a near miss on the way up.
Did you get any near it?
It's not a near miss, but there was a high shot. There was a couple of drone shots of it from above. Yeah,
and
it's awesome.
It may be a stand-in, but
we called that the Apollo 13 shot.
Yeah,
that's the one you're seeing in your head.
Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, there's 4 shots. We're going to be posting something shortly where it's going to show underneath the rocket on the side, the overhead, and then 2 drone shots.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. He says, Alex, please share the link to the recommended extension for the ZS10 Pro.
And I just bought another pair, one with a microphone. I'm going to test the mic to see if it actually works well. So this one will be a little different. I may want to wait another day or two for me to test it, because it is going to be a TRRS as opposed to a TRS. So I got to make sure that the mic, that is compatible with everything that I have. You're talking about the extension. I was thinking about the actual headset. I'll put that in right after we go to the next question. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is up next. How many input channels does Dante Virtual Soundcard support on Windows? And can separate channels be presented as separate devices in the operating system?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I can answer the first part, 64 channels or 16.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah. Channels is sort of on your network bandwidth and everything, and the sample rate that you use. So you probably want to play around with that and test it. And I don't it up as separate devices, but you can definitely pull in inputs and outputs as long as the samples and bit rates are the same between those applications you want to share those signals from.
Yeah, we're still getting a little breakup on your audio there. Next question.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco says, Zoom has introduced multi-spotlight cloud recording, although it seems to not be functional yet. Has anyone found a way to activate this?
I think that we may want to put that into the second hour. I think that would be a good thing for us. We're gonna put this. I'm gonna say cancel. I'm gonna put that back to voting, and someone can put that into the second hour. We have some experts that would be really useful for that. All right, next question.
The next one comes up to us from Tony Mobley again. He says, from Noonan, Georgia, hi, I'm having issues with Wi-Fi 6 in my home. Any suggestions? I've been in conversation with ATT Tech support for 2 weeks on and off.
Go ahead, Rupert.
When it comes to new problems with Wi-Fi, where it was working fine and now you've got a problem either intermittently or permanently, I generally look for what's changed. Have I added a device 2 weeks ago or whenever it was that's, conflicting with something? Even with Wi-Fi particularly, it can be a rogue appliance in your house that's just spewing out interference. Or critically, if you have close neighbors, somebody else has just got a Wi-Fi whatever similar router next door, and you've got channel conflicts or RF noise or whatever. So I just always go back to sort of last known good configuration. Try and undo anything you've done recently. Try and find out whether anything's changed. And if all else fails, just try and scale all your devices back and add them one by one and see where the problem is. Maybe it can be replicated, but it'd be nice to know more also.
Yep. Jeffrey?
First of all, I just want to make sure it's not going to be Wi-Fi 6. I don't think AT&T is putting out any type of modem routers just yet for that. And then with the AT&T modem routers, a lot of them don't have antennas to them, so you definitely want to get them in an open space. So don't put your anything around it as best as possible. Don't put it next to like the power or anything like that, and get it up in the air. And then if you can you might want to start thinking about investing in an actual Wi-Fi router that, and then circumvent the AT&T side of things.
Nigel?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Jeffrey said, which is try and avoid Wi-Fi 6 in a house with a lot of devices, and be careful not to put too many Wi-Fi 6 stations in, because they can spend so long talking to each other, they don't actually spend a lot of time talking to your devices. And if you can, and you really need throughput, hardwire, then, put enough Wi-Fi stations in, but separate the components out and only use Wi-Fi 6 if you have to.
Good, Tony.
I am guilty of using a whole lot of devices with Wi-Fi 6, so thank you for letting me know that. I've been told by AT&T it is Wi-Fi 6, so other than 2 weeks ago, it was working seamlessly and I had no issues at all. I will definitely check out.
Did you add anything, Tony?
I can't think of anything that I added in the last 2 weeks that was different in my setup. I might need to check with my sons and see if they've added a device or two in the last couple of weeks. That's the only thing that I can think of.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. He says, we're talking about 1970s vintage documentation, but how would you coax a 1970s vintage U-matic tape into playing to transfer it to another medium?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, coaxing might be the word. Are you referring to this guy right here? He's a great SP9. I still have some of them floating around. The real issues are going to be whether or not the magnetic tape is still playable. It might have gotten sticky and gooey, and there may be dropouts on it. But there are machines out there. I had one just until recently sitting in my closet. Unfortunately, 3/4 inch is the new beta. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
There are services that will transfer it for you, but understand that that's all they're going to do, and they don't care about the editorial process, and they may not give it to you in a format that's other than like a DVD.
Hey, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, if your career is anything like mine, anything that you did on U-matic, and I did a lot on U-matic, you don't want to see it anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it may be true in my case too. So there are a couple of things very quickly. When the machine has a capstan and it has this very complicated set of wrapping the tape around the helical scan drum, which is running really fast. Cleaning the heads on the drum can be important if it's been sitting for a long time. You should go online and look up some sort of training tape to do that. The other thing is to break loose the capstan, whatever the motor is actually spinning that moves the tape between those things. Make sure the motors haven't sat there and frozen over the course of time. And outside of that, yeah, I highly recommend you find somebody who does this all the time, because it's delicate and it's a very complicated mechanism. If you want to get something, grandma's birthday party or something like that, that's way back on that stuff, and salvage it.
Yeah, it's don't ever take a tape that's more than about 15 years old and try to run it. You need to take it somewhere to have it baked and then recovered, but you only get to do it once. So, as soon as you turn it on, it's going to tear apart. And so you really have to be careful with those types of things. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, up next with what exactly does the Z CAM IPMAN Gemini do? It was mentioned briefly on Office Hours a day or two ago.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I've been really playing, because I'm learning a lot of these things. So this is the field roll monitor, and the idea is you can load up LUTs and you can check the RGB and things like that. And at first I wasn't too sure myself, but I realized it's something that if you're going to have an overall look of an event, like let's say you're making a movie or something like that, and you're going to have like a cool blue color LUT, and in the end you want to be able to match everything to that, so it's a lot less post-production from
we might
there.
be talking about two different devices.
No, it's
in this.
It's exactly I'm referring to this, but the whole point is that
because the IBAN I think is the interface to the Android video interface.
Yeah, because it's going to give you things like how to what type of RGB, how it's going to look, and things like that. So.
I think
that's basically where it's coming from. It's not going to be recording or streaming or anything like that. It is simply another screen that helps you can zoom in so you can see the focus, zoom in so you can see the color, and make the changes that you need to do on the camera.
Right. I think that the primary value of the IPMAN is that it turns into an HDMI input for a standard HDMI input for a Android phone. So it's regardless of the other things. And the problem with using it for any kind of color will be the phone. You don't know how accurate the phone is. But I think that it will be interesting as far as turning into a viewfinder. What I'm really interested in, and I've ordered one, we'll see when it shows up, is whether it shows up as a camera for Instagram. like that's what all of us want to know, and Jeffrey doesn't think it will. So we'll see what happens. But none of us have one yet, so we'll find out. Next question.
Peter Moore is back from Auckland, New Zealand, and he says, sorry if this has been asked and answered before, but is there a link to donate to the Office Hours charity, a SWIFT or IBAN code, something like that?
We're going to put something up in the next couple of weeks. So there'll be a couple things that are focused on a specific event, and then there'll be other things that are just if people want to subscribe. So we're gonna get that on the website in the next probably the next 2 weeks, and just people can put in what it makes sense for them to do that. It would be good to. I've been shouldering some of the costs for a while, so and I'm in trouble with my boss. So about that, not my company boss, my personal boss. So it'll be good to see what we can do there. All right, next question.
Nathan Cashin in Oregon City, Oregon is up next with my 2012 iMac is still chugging along with i7 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 2 gigabytes VRAM. I'm able to edit 4K video fine, but starting to feel the limitations. Is the memory architecture on an M1 that different that it'll be fine with 16 or even 8 gigabytes of RAM on a Mac Mini?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's astonishing what an M1 Mac can do with that new silicon that Apple has in their operating system. I've got a 2015 Power Mac that I've been running, not a Power Mac, Mac Pro that I've been running forever to do stuff. And the M1, the little M1 that I got, it's like the engine that could run circles around it.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have an M1. I have the 2012 MacBook Pro. I still actually use that, but I do not use it for anything more than simply it's something like watching a YouTube video or anything like that. Security issues and everything. It hasn't been updated in many years. So there's going to be a lot of program updates that are going to happen on the M1 that you won't get on that 2012 iMac.
Jason?
Yeah, you'll be just fine. It's hard to understate how different completely new silicon can be.
Jesse?
Well, Apple uses this APFS file system that can create sort of these large automatic backups that can slow down your machine. So it's good to, occasionally take all of your edits off of the computer and just format your drive and kind of start from.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I wanted to answer the memory thing. It's fundamentally a completely different memory architecture. So how you would have typically compared, memory on a Mac or even on a PC to the way memory, when it's directly attached to the system on a chip as it is, those comparisons are completely different. So you can really do a lot more with 8 and 16 where you might have bought 32 or 64 before. So be careful of those comparisons. It was one of the early things that people said about the M1s as well. It's so little memory, but they assumed it was a memory architecture that was the same as a PC, which it's not.
Yeah, I have run out of memory on my the things that I've run out of memory on specifically are Motion and Resolve. So Resolve I run out of memory all the time for what I'm doing. So I can't do heavy Resolve work in the Mac Minis. I have to go to my studio, which has 64 gigs of RAM, but I get little warnings on the Mac Mini almost constantly if I do that. So it's not 100%. If you have other things that I've run out of memory for is Metashape, which I run out of memory on 32 gigs. and there are things they just need to hold in. The memory swapping, as mentioned earlier, is much better on the Mac Mini, but if you need the raw RAM to hold data at the same time, you will run out of memory. So you do have to keep in mind what kind of apps you're using. Next question.
Diogo Nunes in Barcelona, Spain. Up next, Unity Intercom is the subject. Is there a way to import a username list from a file, either an Excel test or maybe a comma separated values list, into a Unity server? I've tried opening a Unity server configuration file in Notepad++, but it did not seem something I could edit.
I think at this point, we're still putting them all in by hand. Now, we don't have to do that many. I mean, I don't think we have more than, I think at Own, I know we don't have more than 35 licenses. And so we don't have the unlimited, so we're not building massive groups. But still, I think that right now we have a spreadsheet that we keep track of it on, of what's being set up for a specific show. But I believe that we're still doing those by hand and then saving out those configurations. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, would the DJI Mini 2 be a solid drone to start with? I like the fact that it is 249 grams and does not require FAA registration.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Douglas, let me give you some advice about drones, and it was given to me by a drone expert. It doesn't matter what kind you have. It just matters that it's expendable and it's cheap when you're starting out, because you're going to crash it, you're going to lose it. Better to get a little experience and then move on to the more expensive, better units out there.
And I've even gotten little ones that are $50, $60, and I think the least expensive one I bought is like $10. They're like this big, and they're great to train on because they're super twitchy. And you once you get good at flying one of those, as the drone gets bigger, it gets easier to fly because it's heavier. It has more, more electronics to manage its position. So starting off with little ones and flying them around the house is how I got started. I still crashed a bunch of drones, and not all of them were cheap. so anyway, over 10 years, probably spent $5,000 or $6,000 on things that are somewhere in the world, but not in my house. Next question.
Tony Mobley's back from Noonan, Georgia. When using more than one Unity comms, do the settings for each need separate setups for controls?
Each person is defined. I assume that's what you're asking. Each person gets defined what they're gonna have access to, what PLs, et cetera, that are there. It's I think, is that what you're asking about, Tony?
I'm actually asking because I'm on Office Hours panel, Unity.com, and I'm on Conversation with Shawnee Mobley comms. Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing that I was before switching back and forth between the two of them with no issues. And I'm finding now that I'm having to tweak each one now. And I was wondering, is that something new, or I should have been doing it that way all along?
Go ahead, Chris.
Tony, do you mean, when you say tweak, do you mean you're tweaking like the buffer override settings and stuff like that, or just the server name, etc.?
No, I'm not that sophisticated with it, Chris. I'm talking about making sure that I'm recognizing the Zoom H6 as the output or input, the microphone, and those kinds of things seem to be switching up. And this may be all related to my whole two week ago experience, where I'm having a lot of different things going on all at the same time, and different failures and that kind of thing. So
your house of technical cards is stacking higher and higher, isn't it? I find it odd that in Unity, I can't copy and paste a server name into the server name field. I switch between Unity instances all the time, and I literally have to go in and type every letter of the server name and every letter and hash and whatever of the password and stuff. It doesn't allow you to paste into that field. Am I the only one that sees that, or?
I've had the benefit of Mickey saving me up with both of my comms channels rather. So I have never had an opportunity to mess that up, Chris.
Yeah, I switch between 3 different instances all the time, and I find it infuriating that I can't just paste a server name in. I'm sure there's some security reason why, but.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Brent Kruger in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Came into a free Countryman E6 that had a shredded cable. Was able to jerry-rig a mini plug to test, but I want to buy a real cable. What's the most common belt pack type that is a presenter I'm likely to run into on site?
Go ahead, Jesse. Yep, you're still coming apart, Jesse. Like we can't hear anything. I'm not sure. Do you have any wireless in your system?
I'm up a little bit. Huh?
Do you have any gate? We're trying to figure it out. It's like you'll have to watch.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a new setup. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's.
I would go to the last setup because this one is not functional.
Yeah, good. Yeah, there's something very wrong there. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it sounds like a Wi-Fi thing to me, but whatever.
It's not. It's something much worse than Wi-Fi.
Okay. Okay. So on the end of wireless systems, there are some common plugs we find, and often they are designated by TA and then a number and F. So even between like Sony and Electrosonics and other major brands, you'll hear TA4F, TA3F, sometimes TA5F, and that's the number of connections in those. But each manufacturer has its own specification. So if you lean toward being on your Countryman mostly plugged into a body pack from Sennheiser, look to their specifications and wire yourself to that, whatever the hardware is you're going to most often use. Electrosonics, I have a lot of electrosonic stuff, and I have TA4Fs on most of mine, but it just depends on what the manufacturer has kind of standardized on.
I actually think that Electrosonics are TA5s, sure as TA4s. I would. Most of the stuff that we've done has been TA4. You can also get converters from TA4 to TA5, so you can. It's just then at that point a solid connection. The other thing you can think about is using a microdot. So you could convert it to a microdot, which then there's lots of microdot converters to whatever you need. The only problem you get into is making sure that little screw is really tight. Otherwise, it starts to break up. Next question.
Mickey G in Missagula, looks like. Once a month, we host a Zoom webinar for 60 people with 4 presenters, 3 in studio and 1 remote. To step up our game and go all remote, I've set up a Zoom ISO Mac M1 Mini deck link to ATEM Extreme. Looking for in-depth help for the audio setup. Thanks.
Yeah, we're gonna bump that one. So any Zoom questions as we're managing these, we have folks from Zoom on the next hour. So let's move Zoom questions. We're gonna push this one back to voting, but let's move Zoom questions into if whoever's managing our questions this morning, please move Zoom questions into the second hour, even if it's misaligned with what the hour is. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is back with, I'm hunting for a way to select cameras on Android between internal and external cameras. The Z CAM IPMAN Gemini has a clear picture but limited utility so far.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I guess we're just seeing a lot of hubbub about this device, but I don't know anything about it specifically, but I'm wondering whether it's using the UVC class compliant, and that's the way it's trying to get in there, much like a webcam would. I went through a phase of trying to do some testing with UVC webcams on Android. Maybe the use case is similar. I found that the Larix Broadcaster app will recognize UVC devices on Android. If you go into the setting, there's a setting in there that you need to go and enable it. But if you can get it into Larix Broadcaster, then that might be a good utility app for you to use it with.
Yeah, my dream of this, of where it could go if it hasn't gone there already, is because the Android is a little bit more malleable. You could theoretically put some kind of handler in there that would say, I'm seeing a video coming in, I'm going to make that available as an Android camera. And I think that would be really interesting for kind of the weird the weird platforms that only want sell video input. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he notes IBM created the Z Xplore, and he's got a link there to the system, platform that uses digital badges to teach skills related to their mainframes. Could a similar platform help develop production professionals in our industry?
We've talked about it. I mean, in Pixel Core we had certifications, and probably be something we'd think about again. But so it's something that you want to step in. I think the mistake people make is they set the certification up before they set the community up, and then it becomes very difficult to make it work correctly. So we're working towards that. Next question.
Chris Comfort in New York says, with regards to Verizon's 5G in-home service, if upload and download speeds are comparable, are there technical reasons that make this a better or worse choice than services like Comcast or Spectrum?
Go ahead, Rupert.
there can certainly be some things to watch out for. Generally, with anything that's cell-based over the networks, they're more likely to have monthly usage limits. So you want to watch out for those. And what happens when you hit that limit? You just get rate capped, and the whole thing's going to clamp down on you. On the cell-based services, whether they're the home ones or hotspots or whatever, you just got to watch out for the varying latency performance over time, which will manifest in jitter rate to you. Basically, it just may have slight fluctuations in your true end-to-end latency over time. And the other thing on cell-based networks in general, maybe all the time, you'll find that you're not actually getting a live internet public IP. You're getting a private IP, and you're going to be traversing the cell network, which is sort of essentially a private network. So if you want to do anything kind of interesting with networking or port forwarding, that can be a challenge sometimes. I'm not sure about this service specifically, but in general, those are the things to watch out for.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, excellent answer from Rupert there. Mine is a little more basic. All 5G is not created equal. There are lower frequency, and then there are higher frequency 5Gs. One of them goes through homes better than others. In other words, if you've got walls and things like that, they're going to traverse the wall a lot easier and get better coverage. So beware of the type of 5G. The higher frequency ones are better.
Jeffrey?
And it also depends on where you are, and how close you are to the tower, the triangulation towers and stuff like that. So if you're in the suburbs, it'll work a lot better than if you're downtown. And if a group of people show up, saturate that tower, then all of a sudden you're running into problems.
Yeah, and I do believe that the higher frequencies will be more susceptible to not passing through devices. I think we were talking about that, but I think it's the other way around, because I think the lower frequencies tend to get through hard device, walls and trees and foliage better than the higher frequencies. The other thing to look at is just how they manage their networks in general. I think you're going to find that Spectrum and Comcast, especially Spectrum, are going to oversubscribe their POPs, and so you're going to end up in a situation where certain times of the day they're not very usable. It doesn't matter how fast it takes to get to Spectrum. It's how does it get to the rest of the internet, and Spectrum is probably the worst on the consumer level. Professional, it's fine, but on the consumer level, they just pack you all in like cattle. So Verizon tends to be much better at that. Just keep that in mind. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. In an in-office environment with a suspended grid ceiling and typical fluorescent light fixtures, what tubes or diffusers or even whole new fixtures would you recommend for retrofitting for better video performance?
Go ahead, Bill.
So it depends on the era the fluorescents were put into an office environment. There was a classic problem that fluorescents from the early days had a substantial deficiency in the magenta spectrum. And so you got a green look that really looked horrible if you had a camera that was colored balanced to normal light balances, normal Kelvin temperatures. Most of the modern fluorescent fixtures are much better than that. So anything on there that says full spectrum or something like that is going to help you. If your tubes are the old style, and this has been around since the 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever, and it's still the same office, retubing the entire thing may be a good practice. It also might be a good practice to just take those facilities out, because another problem was audio. Improperly wired fluorescent ballasts are a notorious cause of RF in a lot of environments. So make sure that the office was done in the last 10 years, I'd say, and then make sure that the colorimetry, and you check for sound, and hopefully a tube replace may be all that you need.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, get rid of the fluorescent lights. They're not going to help you any. In my system, I have LEDs installed. In fact, I've got these LEDs, and I have other ones over here, which are much closer to daylight if I need to fill that area in. But as you can see from my grid ceiling, I've also placed diffusers every so often, which helps with the sound quality in the room and makes it a much more friendly video environment.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that you can, you'd be surprised at how much you can put on a grid that's, if it's those hanging grids, especially if you're conscious to, where their hang points are in the ceiling, you'd be surprised. You can put a lot of weight. I'm just trying to find you an example here of ones that I have a picture here somewhere. But we have, we've definitely hung like multiple 4x4s and a whole bunch of light panels and all kinds of stuff from a standard just hanging grid, or a hanging ceiling. So definitely don't go too far, but you can actually get pretty aggressive about it. Next question.
Next one comes from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Lucid Link Cloud network attached storage feels exponentially transformative in production. Why? And he's got a link there for Lucid.
Sky, real quick.
I was at a NAB roadshow yesterday, and I got to talk with them. And Chris and I are using it for the editorial process for the OH space. And to me, it feels as exponentially, as I say, transformative as when we took the disks out of the computers. It's a storage device that he was physically modifying a clip while it was broadcasting. And I'm still trying to get my head around all the functionality that this tool is, and that's why I'm asking. It's a lot more than just a cloud storage thing. It's the next thing, and I'm not quite sure what that means yet. So that's why I'm asking.
Good, Chris.
I'm loving it. I'm dealing with a client right now where they're sending me stuff via Box, and Box is atrocious. Dropbox has its problems. Frame is great for reviewing files. It's not for sharing files. The way that this thing works, there's like a whole lot of magic fairy dust on it, and it just keeps working. I love it. I love Lucid Link.
I wonder if you can patent fairy dust.
I think it's been patented. I think Adobe has a patent on it, actually.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
I don't know if it was shown, but I did do an interview with Lucid Link at NAB, and we talked specifically about this because there's several different cloud services that one I remember a few weeks ago where they talked about how they did a whole movie and it went all the way around the world. And that can take up to 2 weeks to actually produce, do the rendering of the movie. And it traversed across the world before it was done, and it was done. So we're going to see a lot of that from these companies.
You should put them into the second hour suggestions and vote them up, and we'll see if we can't get them on the show.
And they're willing to be on the show. Yeah, I asked them.
I'm wondering how hard you have to shake a fairy to harvest the dust.
It's substantial.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, next question.
Matt Halverson at Brookings, South Dakota said, when converting an SDI camera to fiber, do I need two Blackmagic designed mini converter optical fiber 12G SDIs, one for the camera to plug into and one for the switcher, or is there something else that I can plug the camera into?
You need two. One on each end. And then you also, remember, they look very inexpensive until you decide to buy the SFPs, which are more expensive than the piece of hardware. So they're just remember that, especially if you're getting the 12G ones, which not that I'm buying a bunch of them right now, and it just hurts. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, is up next. I need to get a couple of semi-disposable lav mics for use with the Rode Go 2 and DJI mic recommendations for good, inexpensive options.
Good, Jesse.
So that one has a little 3.5 millimeter input. So just about any mic that you can find on Amazon or something. Maybe actually, if you want better bang for your buck, you might look at True Audio or look at Gotham Sound and see what you can find used. That's 3.5. But just beware that those little Rode systems are 2.4 gigs. So you're not going to be able to go very far with those without dropouts.
Good, Jeffrey.
I'd love to say yes to that, but I've found in my travels that some of these mics will work on their Sony, and some will work on not Samsung, but I can't think of the other one. Sennheiser, that's the other one, and they will not work on the other. I've had a lot of success with Micronic. That's a UK-based company. I actually used that headset mic during my NAB stuff, and I had it plugged into a Rode clone, and I also had it plugged into my DJI mic that worked perfectly. I can send you the model and all the links.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up again, and he says, if you were building a personal SDI production lab or streaming studio, would you go with the ATEM Constellation HD or wait for the ATEM Constellation 4K?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'd go with the new 2ME. I think it makes a lot of sense. You can rack mount it and have a separate control surface if you want it. I think it's a bargain. It makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the reality is that, especially for personal, I think that the HDs make more sense from a cost perspective. I just don't know. I started buying 4K in 2016 and thinking that we were all going to move to 4K, but I've probably only done, 20 or 30 shows in 4K out of over 1,000 since 2016. So I don't, so I think that it's something I like to record the cut to, but then what we've kind of gotten into is that I'd rather do local records on the camera at even a higher resolution and then edit it later to get that anyway. So it's, but we just haven't done that many streams. Now we've probably done more 4K for office hours than anything else, as far as the live cuts. But that's coming in. So we'll be doing lots of 4K. So, we're fully moving to 4K in June with the new color correction and everything else. But it's the thing. Hey, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I am a notorious knuckle dragging, like I don't like getting pushed forward into 4Ks, 8Ks, 12Ks, and all those Ks. I am perfectly happy with 1080 myself for most stuff. Yeah, shooting 4K, but going back to the U-matic discussion earlier, back in the dying days of U-matic when Beta SP was becoming a thing, I used to always say, composite video's fine. Components for people that can't make composite look good.
Yeah, I mean, I like originating in 4K, and it's nice to have 4K. I have paid all the 4K stuff investments off that we've made, and then a lot, because we were doing 4K per eye, 360. We were doing, there's a whole bunch of things that we were doing that paid it off. But so it's been worth it. But it's been, if I was going to do it at home, I think 1080 is fine. Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, I usually produce for 1080 and shoot in 4K because it gives you flexibility.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with After Belfast, Mobley, and Office Hours Space. How can we as a community drive the media technology world forward once more?
I think that there's a couple things that we're working on. One is, of course, more coverage of these events. So NAM and Cinegear are coming up, WWDC as well. So that coverage, I think, is going to be something that we can help push things forward. And then we're going to see doing more shows like what we've been doing on the stage, and then broadcasting to more networks. So we're working on that right now. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's done, and Nathan GS in Singapore is up next. How would you approach treating a room for sound treatment with sound panels on walls and ceiling?
Jeffrey?
It's going to depend on what you're going to be doing. If you're going to be doing talking head type stuff, or if you're going to be doing music or anything like that. If you're going to be doing music, take a look at how some of these recording studios are set up, because it's not going to be all sound panels on the wall. It's going to be wood mixed in with that. So there's going to be a little bit of a reverb to it, a little bit of bounce and everything like that. Whereas if you're going to be doing, overlays and things like that, that you'll probably want to have it all padding. The other thing that you want to think about is when you walk into a room like that, a lot of people have problems. I know I do. When I walk in a room, the ear pressure just changes and it hurts a little bit when I go in there.
Go, Jesse.
Well, it totally depends on what you're doing in the room, but you definitely want to start with the right type of mic and pointing it in the right direction. So if you're trying to isolate things, just try directional microphones if it's just someone speaking. But then, there are some inexpensive solutions like carpeting and sound blankets if you're not worried about how it looks. But there's also a lot of confusion about, sound isolation and diffusion. So if you're trying to eliminate sound coming from your neighbors or something like that, loud music, it'll cost a lot more money than dealing with, diffusion.
Mitchell?
Yeah, the quick solution, and pardon me for waving my camera around, is to make sure you deaden the room. And I've used the Prime Acoustic cloth, which is also very fancy work with Velcro. And if you keep looking at the ceiling, I've got these sound panels in the ceiling. And what's neat about this carpeting material is that you can attach Velcro to it. So if you decide you need a bass trap in a corner, you just slap it up there with the Velcro on it, and it works great.
You go ahead, Bill.
My approach always starts with living in the room for a full day as much as I can and listening to the room and everything beyond the room, which means that I want to be there through morning drive if I'm in an urban area. I want to be there if I'm near an airport when the planes are landing and the rest of that, even overnight, because for me, as somebody who does a lot of voiceover work, if I get called in the middle of the night and want to come in, I want to make sure there's nothing that I'm hearing in the room that I need to get rid of that is actually there. So literally, I go in and read a book book and just kind of hang out and then make notes. I also, there's two other things. Number one, there's a simple little clap test you can do in an empty room just to kind of get an idea of how much ring out there is depending on how big the space is. The other thing is to have somebody else come in, not me, because if I'm talking out loud, I've got all sorts of head resonance. I want to hear what somebody else sounds like from various listening positions as they move around and read out loud. That'll give me some sense of the room's acoustic, and then I can start from there to treat things I heard that I didn't like.
Yeah, Chris, real quick.
That's a great suggestion, Bill, to spend a 24-hour period of time in the room. Audio engineers a lot of times will take a system in and they'll go and record a room for like a week. There was a studio that we were looking into buying about 25 years ago in the South Bay. Turns out it was right underneath the flight path of the Air Force Base. And the people who ended up buying it spent, I think, like $250,000 soundproofing it.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. He says, I think a lot about backups lately. I want to use my iPad Pro if the Mac Mini fails. What do I need to have in place on the iPad if the Mac fails? And I'm trying to be proactive during a live event.
I think that if you're trying to do that, number one is I'd figure out why your Mac Mini is failing. That's a very unusual thing to have happen, if it's new. But secondly, what I would say is that, when you have a lot of things going wrong, you're going to want to back up and look at the overall infrastructure, because if you have a lot of new devices and they're going wrong, it's really not the devices, it's the way that they're being connected and what they're being asked to do. So you want to really look at what those are, especially on the Mac side. There should be no reason for any of that happening. So if it's happening, we need to kind of really rethink the entire infrastructure of what you're doing. So I would look at that more. Otherwise, I would just have Zoom on it, so that you could jump into it. And if you're doing any of the production at home, that might be part of the problem. I would get to a point where the heavy production is being done somewhere else to make sure that you're just contributing to it. Rupert, real quick.
Yeah, just like the previous answer of testing the room for sound, test the backup, run with it for a day on some less critical events, and you'll just find what you need piece by piece.
Yep. Tony, real quick.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Just in case someone doesn't have a Mac at all, can this be done? And, is it possible? And for it to be quality?
Not the same quality, but you can definitely have an iPad. We've done things where we've had multiple devices in like a Zoom session. One's just turned off on video, and if something goes bad, we just turn that one on. And so that's another way to look at it. Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Thoughts on Kevlar reinforced cables?
I think it sounds like a great idea. I've never used Kevlar reinforced cables, but it sounds great. Go ahead, Jesse.
Sounds heavy. Going towards lighter and lighter cables nowadays. I don't want to pull around a bunch of copper if I don't have to, and Kevlar is just a added material. But I guess if you're going into battle or something, that might be the thing to do.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. I've noticed that most members of government science advisory committees have master's or PhD degrees. With the changes in our educational system that we're seeing, do you think that the traditional gatekeeper degrees will lose significance?
I think that science and government and education are pretty hooked on their little pieces of paper. So I think that they'll probably hang on to those for a little while. I think most of the rest of the world's going to move on, from established degrees. You can already see that they just don't pencil out for most people. Like, it doesn't really matter. And I speak as someone, to be clear, I speak as someone who doesn't have any piece of paper at all. So anyway, that says I know what I'm doing. And so, but I think that they're cute, but they're not particularly. I don't think that they're particularly necessary at this point, especially when you look at what Apple's doing, what Google's doing, what a lot of companies are doing. They're basically bypassing the education system. Grow with Google is we gave up. Like, you should just read it as every time you see grow with Google, it's we gave up on the education system. Like, that's what that means. They're saying you don't have to have any degree, you don't have to have anything else, because the education system is not producing what they want at the quantity that they need. And so I think that if you have a degree, I think it's great. You can probably, right now, it's probably get you in the door, but you're seeing those requirements dropping at corporate levels all over the place, because it's just because the demand is so high and the supply is so low. You have what we call demand destruction going on, where they're not looking for it anymore because they can't find it. Go ahead, Bill.
There's a ton of disciplines where, honestly, the discipline is evolving way faster than the education system, and it doesn't make sense. There are those still things. I'm not going to a doctor, an MD, unless he has a degree from an institution that watched him or her come through the system and prove that they can do what they say they do. That's just a bad idea.
No, I think medicine, legal, education, science, government, those are all things that probably are still going to be important. But I think that's, I mean, technically, that's probably half of our employment in the country, but across those things. But I think that overall, I think you're going to find that there's less and less dependence on it because the companies just aren't getting the people that they need. Go ahead, Jason.
The advanced degrees, I don't think, are going anywhere. The advanced scientific degrees are not going anywhere. As someone with a couple of these, not graduate level, but bachelor degrees, I can tell you they're not all they're cracked up to be, and just do the best you can because no one's ever going to stop you if you don't take no for an answer.
Last question for the first hour.
Tony Mobley, Newton, Georgia, gets the honor. Rolling back to Big Sur should be considered for me, he wonders?
I would probably not, unless you know that there's a specific compatibility issue with what you have. So I probably wouldn't roll backwards at this point. Yeah, I think it's pretty. I mean, I have a variety of stability issues, but I'm not sure what they are yet. So I don't know if they're a Monterey or not. All right. We are now changing subjects. We are going into our second hour, and we have some great guests here. Kat Adams, who hasn't been here before. Hi, Kat. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Hello.
Hey.
Happy Thursday.
Great to have you. And then also Andy Carluccio. Andy's and
everybody.
And Sam is hidden there. I don't know if Sam is popping up or not, but Sam is hidden there, so maybe he'll pop out as well. So we're gonna hand it off to you to talk about. We have some new features coming for Webinar. As you know, we're pretty into Webinar here, so we're so excited to have you. So, Kat, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thank you so very much for having me be part of your office hours today. For folks who haven't met me before, I'm Kat Adams. I'm a product manager for Webinar here at Zoom. Been with the company for over 5.5 years, starting with the technical support team, managing their event services group, helping customers move their events from on-site conferences to online using Zoom. Did that for about 2 years as part of my tenure with Zoom through prior to 2020 and through that, and then moved over to the Webinar product team last April to start working on cool features for Webinar. So if you've been checking our updates, we've had a few great things drop in the past couple of months. We've had webinar attendee reactions where you can see floating emojis from the audience display over the screen of your webinars. We've had webinar session branding where you can add a wallpaper to your Zoom environment within a webinar space instead of just having the static background. The ability to have mapped virtual backgrounds for your panelists as well. So that way they don't have to download a file to their computer, then find it and upload it to the Zoom client in order to be able to use in the session. The virtual background is able to be automatically applied as they enter, which is really nice. And then name tags, which is a type of lower third where you can use chroma key to really customize and fine tune the color that you'd like for those name tags to display, and include text about the person as well, which is a brand new feature. And then last but certainly not least, Backstage, which is a behind the scenes space for panelists to be able to use for the entire duration of the webinar, allowing them to have private conversations, do your AV checks before they go live to your audience without having to have them join 30 minutes in advance. So that way, if you have a longer session that you're running, you can have those periodic check-ins. Backstage also allows for your behind the scenes folks to actually be behind the scenes. They'll be able to answer Q&A, chat, launch polls and things like that from within Backstage. And we just released that feature this April, and we're very excited to have it in the market.
That's great. And did you want to add anything, Andy, to
Yeah, just to say that I think that what you're seeing with some of these in-client features is enhancing the ability to produce things natively, right? So we see a variety of use cases on the Zoom platform where people are sometimes using external tools to help produce things. I think some of these new features will be helpful as the way that you think about, maybe where to put talent and things like that. But also for, a lot of users, they're just using the native in Zoom feature set. And we're trying to help you get a better event look, feel, and flow. And these features, I think, help accommodate a lot of that. So it's interesting to see kind of who falls on what side of it. I think there's something for everybody here.
Yeah, I think these are great. I think that it's really important. Obviously, we push Zoom a little harder than most people do, but I think that it is really great to make sure that people can use the turnkey solutions. I know I've mentioned in the past that my wife is using basically the basic Zoom structure to make everything work, and she does it day in, day out, and it's been very successful. So all these new features do make a huge difference. And welcome, Sam. It's good to see you here.
Always good to be here.
It's disorienting without your normal room behind you, So
I'm disoriented as well. We were working on a hybrid event in our Kansas office yesterday. So
got it.
Here's the week.
Very good, very good. So you are in Kansas. So anyway, go ahead, Mitchell. Did you have something to add to that?
I was just going to say, first of all, thank you for coming, and we appreciate it. I think that you kind of partially covered it a minute ago, is that a lot of people say, wow, office hours sounds great. I think that Zoom gets us about 80% of the way there, and we have to take it the rest of the way. But that's saying a lot, because I don't think anything else out there could get us this close to being this good. And one of the best compliments I got was from a Zoom sales associate when he said, wow, you guys look great.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, again, what I think hopefully we show here is what Zoom can look like. I think a lot of people have it like, oh, Zoom is, I'm very clear. I was talking to someone about this yesterday. They were talking about Zoom meetings and so on and so forth. And I said, if Zoom sounds good and looks good, then you can do it for a very long period of time. I said, if radio and TV looked and sounded like what most people jump on to do, people wouldn't watch that. The reason that we watch it is the higher quality inputs, and so Zoom has the scale to do that. But let's go ahead now. If you have questions for our producers who are watching, if you've got questions, we have this is an incredible group of people here to ask questions related to Zoom and webinars specifically, and some of the new features. So definitely throw those questions into Makana. And let's go ahead and jump to the first question.
Nigel Desau comes up with it from Austin, Texas, and he says, can you explain the fundamental difference between Zoom meeting, events, webinar, and rooms? And which do you use when?
That is a fabulous question. So Zoom, the first piece I'm going to take are Zoom meetings, events, and webinars. So Zoom meetings is a tool that I feel like a lot of people have gotten very familiar with over the course of the pandemic. It is a group area where everyone can be on camera, have microphone access, be able to share their screen, chat as a very kind of communal type of a tool where everyone's kind of in equal footing. Webinar is very more of a controlled environment where you have a group of pre-selected individuals that have the video, shared content, and microphone access. But then your attendees who are viewing the webinar receive that content that those core people is sending out. So it allows for you to have a more tailored experience. Y'all are viewing us in a webinar today, if you're using that, which allows for you to have that really nice and pristine look and feel. Zoom Events is a wrapper that is able to go around meetings and webinars. So you can have more complex registration, you can have ticketing, you have the ability to have one registration for multiple sessions, and allows for you to have that one-stop shop for your meetings and webinars, whether you're doing just something small or if you're having a major conference that's going to be leveraging meetings and webinars. Zoom Rooms is one of our solutions as well. It allows for conference rooms like the one that Sam's in right now to connect to the session, and allows for you to have in session people be able to, like on-site people be able to participate within a virtual experience. So you can leverage Zoom rooms within your meetings and webinars and soon as part of your Zoom events.
That's great. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, can you pull an NDI feed from Backstage, or is it just after you move them to the main stage that you can pull a feed?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a crack at that one. So when it comes to Backstage and how it interacts with production tooling, maybe we'll take the more generalized answer there. So today, your Zoom Rooms, Zoom OSC, and Zoom ISO aren't able to reach Backstage. Now, we announced right before NAB that Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO are going to be updated this summer. And as part of that update, we'll have Backstage compatibility. So you'll be able to bring those tools back there. Zoom Rooms, I think, has a summer release and a fall release. So we'll have to see kind of where it lands on that. I don't know if we have a commit yet. My colleagues can maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that. But what I think is interesting about this question, what it leads to, is some updated guidance that I think we need to give on production topology when using Zoom. So once these tools are able to access Backstage, you're going to have a really interesting way of flipping the system, let's say, flipping the script, where you might choose to leave your talent backstage for the entire show and bring your production hardware systems and software compatible devices into the Backstage area as though it were another meeting or a breakout room. And then you grab them from there, you push it through your production system, and then you take the result and you put it on stage for the audience to see. So you might actually end up using Backstage in reverse once these production tools are there. Now, why would you do that instead of using a different meeting? Well, with Backstage, you have the ability to see the chat, the polls, the Q&A, as well as a copy of what's going on the main stage. So it's a little easier to bridge the two worlds together. Whereas with the traditional transport architecture in our current guidance, you have to sort of build out that entire back hall. Maybe you're using Zoom OSC in both meetings to grab the chat and pump it from one place to another. Maybe you're using screen captures to give confidence monitors back with virtual cameras. Backstage is sort of wrapping all that around for you. So I think when we have those production tools available for Backstage, we'll update the guidance on our production topology when using webinars and suggest that you leave the talent in Backstage for mixed production using external tools.
Yeah, I think that for us, the next thing we would request is having multiple rooms in the Backstage, because we actually manage people in much more detailed ways, where that we're grabbing stuff from a stage like this, but there still might be a green room, and there might be a lobby, there might speaker lobby, green room, hair and makeup. We do all of those things, and those for us are different rooms. So it'd be interesting to see what would be possible there. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand's up next, and he says, I noticed Andy is on the panel. Good to see you back. What has it been like being acquired by Zoom, and can you share your experiences with onboarding, transitioning from your small company to a large one, and so forth?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for the question. It's been, I think, a very delightful experience, actually. It's exciting because we had a lot of things that we were thinking about, right, in the world of production that now we have an opportunity to really tackle with the resources of Zoom. I think that was, a major theme of, what our original messaging was about the acquisition of Liminal's assets and, the bringing over of our key personnel, was to really take a look at production and try to supersize it on the Zoom platform. So that's been really exciting for me personally. It's been a period of a lot of change. I moved from Virginia to California to take that next step in my personal life and to be more to be able to show up at places like 090 and things like that, and to meet with partners and begin to take that next step. I was able to go to NAB, US ITT on Zoom's behalf, which was really interesting to be able to say, okay, how do we engage with the market in this way. So that's been very interesting. I think we've made a lot of progress as well in a very short period of time. I know that it might not be so visible to everybody exactly what that is, but I can tell you that the best is yet to come. A lot of cool things are coming down the line, and to stay tuned because we're working really hard.
I know that the purchase of Liminal was really had us get very bullish about the future of where Zoom was going from a production perspective. I think Zoom's always been in the lead, but there's it does come down to key personnel and backgrounds and so on and so forth to help move it forward. Let's go to the next question.
Daniel Goldstein comes up from Washington, D.C. I recently worked with a dummy Zoom webinar registration system, and I couldn't figure out how to have Zoom send calendar invitations to registrees. Isn't this a feature? Am I doing something wrong?
I'd be happy to take that. So when you have attendees who register for a webinar, Zoom has the ability to send out an email to the attendees saying, hey, this is your confirmation email with your link and details. There's an add to calendar button within that email that they can then add it to the calendar. We do have a feature on the roadmap that we are working to be able to send out a calendar invite directly instead of just the email. So hopefully you all will be seeing that soon.
And I made the mistake one time of updating when we've been running this one for hundreds and hundreds. I think we've done this 750 times in a row or something. And so, we periodically update it for another 45 days. And there was one window where I didn't realize that not notifying everybody when you make the change means that nobody gets an email and no one gets the calendar events and there was a lot of gnashing of teeth. So it definitely works. And then people miss it when it's not there. All right, next question.
John Preto, our friend in Las Vegas, says, we have several clients tell us that they can no longer use Zoom because of, quote, security reasons, close quote. They are telling us they are migrating to Microsoft Teams. How do we respond to this?
Chris, do you want to jump on something first?
Yeah, I do. Because and by the way, back the people working this questions, when you see my question, you can throw it out because I didn't realize John was asking the same question. What we're seeing is that they're literally getting hostile to Teams Zoom. And we all know that Zoom is a better offering. It's a better product. It's a better tool. But what they're getting is a bunch of lies from Microsoft. And there is they're saying, oh, it's great. It's fine. It's the same as Zoom. Why can't we? We're doing these shows with like multiple backstage rooms and stuff like Alex was describing. And the producer says, oh, by the way, we're going to have to move everything to Teams. I was like, that's not the same thing. That's like saying, I want to fly to New York. Oh, but I need you to take a stagecoach instead. Yes, they'll both get you to New York, but it's going to be a completely different ride. And so what I see that we need is use cases, explanations at a technical level and a marketing level. There needs to be Zoom needs to really get in the face of corporate America and explain why it's a better tool, because right now Microsoft is doing it better, and people are saying, the PR part. Yes. Absolutely. No, it's absolutely the PR part. And it's hard for us who are just, a bunch of nerds and geeks to say, well, no, but Keynote's better than PowerPoint. It's kind of that thing. Mm-hmm. And we need help from the mothership.
Does anyone want to respond to that from Zoom?
Well, you mentioned security. Are they raising particular issues that we can give better guidance on, or is it just general security?
They just say, they're hearing Microsoft say, "Oh, we're better," and they go, "Oh, well, Microsoft," And the irony is, they're like Microsoft is like the 800-pound gorilla, and your guy's mascot is a 30-ton whale. So you need to step it up.
Well, yeah, I definitely think more case studies and breakdowns and things like, even just showing people what we did for Office Hours 2.0 and how Zoom is involved in that, I think provides a good example of infrastructure that, could be a good case study for those kind of things. But I agree with your point. There's a lot of things that can be done on visibility. I think particularly in the vertical of production, as we start to deploy more features, it'll be nice to then, a couple months after launch, go back and say, hey, what are the success stories there? That's something Zoom likes to do a lot, is like to dive into those. So I think as we move more into production, hopefully we see more of those and have the opportunity to engage.
Usually our experience has been, because I do events where we have, the minister of defense ministry and generals and, all kinds of folks in it, and security comes up, and usually they want us to turn down the security, because I turn it all the way up in Zoom. I just go, woot, 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 woot. Now you're going to have to do all these things. And they're like, oh, that'd be too hard to log in. And I'm like, well, that's secure. What part of security do you want me to pull back? Because I can turn the dials all the way up to a point where it is very, very secure. And, and we're absolutely sure that so we have people who this security, like literally security is their business. And they're asking us to turn the security dials back down again, so that it's easier to use. So there's always that balance.
Clearly, actual security is not the issue. It's perceived security. They already have Microsoft in their locked down infrastructure, and Teams is there, so therefore it's okay.
Yeah,
it's the perception. It's not the actuality. It's the perception. And Zoom needs to step up at the perceived level by education.
See, mine is
at a corporate level. Not us. We get it.
My Teams crashes every time I turn it on. So I just tell people and it is. I mean, I'm not making it up. It literally crashes while I'm logging in to someone's event. So I start logging in and it goes, oh, it just quits without saving. Just disappears, and I get some error message or whatever. And so my response is generally, hey, I can't get in. Can I send you a Zoom link? Because we can't have this meeting. I can't get into Teams, which has been the same for the last 2 months. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer is up next from Viera, Florida. He says, when will Zoom offer recording of individual video feeds on a meeting like it does audio files? Thanks.
Any plans for that? It's a lot of video. That would be...
I don't know that anything's been said about that. I definitely know that this is a feature request. So, it is something that the team has heard you on. I don't know if we have any guidance beyond that.
Yep. Next question.
Next one comes from David Brady in New York City. He says, using Zoom rooms in production, how does one force original audio mode? From the controller settings, the gear icon into the microphone to the advanced toggle, there are only two options, advanced audio processing and advanced noise suppression, but no explanation.
So I can probably take that one. Zoom rooms doesn't have true original sound, similar to your desktop client. There is actually a different audio path. In Zoom rooms, the closest you get is turning the noise reduction all the way down, disabling that, and then turning advanced audio processing off. In that mode, that's the mode that's designed if I were to have, like, for instance, in this room, I have a P300 DSP. So I have advanced audio processing turned off. It says, Zoom, you don't need to do it. I've got it. Same thing that original sound is doing. It's not exactly the same audio processing path as desktop takes, but that's the least amount of processing you get in Zoom rooms.
Interesting. Next question.
Comes from Hasma Kajar in Cape Town, South Africa. He says, it appears that On Zoom is the product for me for the cooking show, but it's not available in South Africa. Zoom announced today that they're stepping up presence in South Africa and appointed a distributor. Does this mean anything for On Zoom?
I'm happy to take that one.
Sure.
On Zoom, we are definitely still looking out for our markets that it's becoming available in. As we expand our presence into other countries, we're hoping to add more to that list. So definitely keep on lookout for that, and hopefully we'll have some more information for you soon.
And how do you distinguish from webinar and Zoom events? Where does On Zoom fit into that puzzle?
On Zoom is definitely more of a consumer marketplace type of a tool. For events. So the cooking show example is an excellent one, where you want to have your cooking show available to as wide of an audience that's interested in such things as possible. So On Zoom gives you the ability to list it on a marketplace that people could then search. When it comes to distributing things like On Zoom and Zoom events to other countries, part of it is payment. How do we work with payment solutions and the rules of the country that we're trying to establish market presence in? So that's part of the reason why the international rollout is a bit slower for those products.
Got it. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada says, I use webinars frequently in an education context. Usually I need the audience following along with me. Is there an easy way to get a gallery view showing on everyone's screens at once?
I'm trying to think about how that would what gallery.
Is it a matter of just, are we talking about the remote audience or the in-person audience?
I think it's the remote audience. Is there any way to get the gallery view showing everyone's screen? I think it's
follow host view and then set it to gallery view in webinar.
I think the issue, I think I read it. I think I understand. I think that they want to see every screen, have a screen share for every person. I think is the goal here is to, it would be in a classroom experience, you want to see everybody's screens. We would do this typically in most classrooms that I've worked in. We would use like Apple Remote Desktop, and I see a whole grid of everybody's screens. And so the goal there is how do we, and I don't think there's any way to do that right now to have that other than using something like having everybody put OBS or that type of thing on there so that they could pull the screen and make it a virtual camera. Does that sound?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if that's the kind of use case you're digging towards, yeah, you would need OBS or something to take the screen share and make it a camera to bring it in. And then the other piece that may also answer the question, if I read it slightly differently, is on meetings, focus mode. Focus mode is kind of made for education for this. And focus mode is a way to have meetings which have video participants and then be able to lock it down so that, for instance, your teacher can still see everyone's videos, but the students don't. So the students just see the teacher. And so combining that with that screen share idea of bringing in your screens via OBS, that's a little bit of a thing to have to get through it during your first day of class. But after you get it, maybe you have it for the semester. And then you could actually have all the screen shares come in and have the teacher be able to see everyone's screen, but not have the students be able to see each other's screens, which could be really useful.
Yeah. I was thinking about the use of Zoom ISO for that as well, that a teacher could theoretically have it all going, be pulled all out and then being able to just say, I want to look at this screen, this screen. I mean, you could do it in Zoom too, but you could probably make it pretty fluid as well.
Yeah.
Really.
The other thing I'd think about is for developer guidance, because that's kind of what my world is. This is where Zoom Apps, I think, becomes really interesting, and the way that it can interact with what we call our Layers API and how that can deal with arranging content in a more customizable way. We have group modes, we have all sorts of different things, camera modes, all sorts of different things that can be done. If you're looking to build a solution like this, that could be an interesting point of entry for building customized behavior that you push out to all the students, and then it ties into some other system and helps you do a more customized arrangement.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Zoom ran an event yesterday called How to Produce a More Professional Virtual Event with Zoom's Backstage. How'd it go?
That was fun. We had a tremendous amount of questions from the audience, which was really great. We talked briefly about some of the new webinar features that we had coming out, as well as Backstage, and did a quick demo on the feature. We do have a recording for that, so if anyone wanted to have access to that, we'd be happy to work with office hours to get out that link. But it was good. It was great to see the different questions that are coming in about Backstage and just getting some early feedback on the tool through that Q&A.
That's great. Next question.
Ricky G in Missoula is back with once a month we host a Zoom webinar for 60 people with 4 presenters, 3 in the studio and 1 remote. To step up our game and go all remote, I've set up a Zoom ISO Mac Mini M1 and using DeckLink to ATEM Extreme. Looking for in-depth help for the audio setup. Thanks.
Sure. I can give a couple of pointers on how you might deal with audio in Zoom ISO today. Well, if you're using a DeckLink, I assume you're using Black Siphon. And one of the features that Black Siphon has is the ability for you to grab individual channels of a multi-channel audio device and actually send that down the SDI line. So if that's what you're looking to do, you could take something like Loopback, create a bunch of virtual audio cables basically, and you would be sending the master audio, to be clear, the mixed audio feed down these feeds, but you could use that to get it out. The other thing that I see people do is take like a Dante Avio or DVS or something like that and tie it in through that system if you're looking for more of an IP focused thing versus copper infrastructure to get the mixed audio feed out. We've also seen, USB interfaces and things like that as well to deal with it. So those are a couple of different ways you can get the master audio out of the Zoom ISO client, which again behaves like a Zoom client in that respect.
Yeah, and I have I've only tested it with 2 so far, but I'm moving towards testing 4 outputs from my studio. So the Mac Studio, of just taking the 4 USB-Cs on the back end and feed them into the Extreme, and now I've got now I can address those 4 outputs. Next question.
Jesse Mills up next from the San Francisco Bay Area. Zoom has introduced multi-spotlight cloud recording, although it seems not to be functional yet. Has anyone found a way to activate this?
So I was wondering if this was a misread on multi-spotlighting for the live streaming gateway, because I know that we did that. Did we announce the cloud recorder? I wasn't sure about that. I think it's the live streaming gateway that has multi-spotlighting, and I've tested that myself and confirmed that that's there. Of course, there's I think definitely interest in seeing, how does Zoom appear in different places. So there's something to be said for, testing that ahead of time. And it's something that we are looking at, is how these different gateways and services do or don't look the same.
Next question.
Elwinson Spiro in Berlin is up next. He says, aside from the release announcement, is there any specific information you can share with us about Zoom OSC and or Zoom ISO, such as planned and or updated features?
Yeah, I can't get into features too much, but what I can say is that we talked about new workflows and new compatibilities, right? So one of the things right now that we've noticed is that as the Zoom client has become so much more advanced with new updates and things like that, we want to be able to inherit a lot of those changes into the into those applications. The other thing I'd say is that Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO are built on the Zoom SDK. So when you see new features appear in those SDKs, I have access to those when I'm building these apps. So you can you can read into that as you will, but there are some things there that are rather interesting that I think you can assume that we'll take advantage of. But I'll let you read in on that and see where we might be going.
I think we've been asked, like, how would we use another platform, to do office hours? Like, would you ever use one? I'm like, well, I mean, beyond the fact that Zoom works really well for us, I was like, Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO, I don't think, like, between Zoom OSC, Zoom ISO, and Isadora, like, the show doesn't get done. So knowing, having that raw information coming out is incredibly powerful, and I don't think any other platform has anything like it. So it's a really interesting puzzle. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, does the Zoom SDK on Android support UVC camera?
So I looked into this when I saw the question in the queue. As the latest update that I saw on this was in January of 2021, where we said no on that. I've asked to see if there's any update regarding UVC presence. And I'll let you know. I'll reach out to you through Discord if I find an answer that's more specific than that. I think part of it as well, it would be helpful to me if you could specify whether you mean our meeting SDK or our video SDK, because they handle video devices in slightly different ways with slightly different options. So it would be helpful for me to know, are you talking about trying to receive frames from a UVC device as raw data and push that up through an SDK? Or are you just trying to interact with that as a device level, operating system available camera to bind to and the meeting SDK? It would help me to know that, and then I can try to give you more specific guidance.
I think the more specific question is that we're all swirling around this Z CAM Gemini system, which is it basically lets us have an HDMI input into an Android phone. So a lot of us are kind of swirling around, because what that would mean, of course, is that we could join Zoom with an Android phone and then just pipe a full switch, cameras, everything else into Zoom, from that. So I think because I know Chris has one of those, and so I think that's the what we're kind of swirling around.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see too with like the YOLO box and stuff that is basically an Android device. That larger device they were showing, like to be able to pump switch content into TikTok, Instagram, that kind of stuff. That was done by building the switching stuff in hardware and then presenting that to the device. So it's not switching at a software level. It actually shows up as a hardware camera with its routes being managed outside of the system. So I think there's a lot of architectural questions.
Yeah, but I think that the biggest thing is, can we grab onto that video feed that's being provided to the Android phone and put it into Zoom? I think that all the questions that we have around it are related to that thing, because it basically opens up, it would transform our video production on the field. Go ahead, Sam.
Unless something's changed that I missed, I don't think the Zoom mobile client on either iOS or Android is going to let you do an HD signal. So if we're talking about taking a really nice camera, bringing it in HDMI, nice glass is going to look like nice glass, but at the end of the day, you're going to be limited to 360 coming in on our mobile client there.
Really?
No, that's actually changed in the last couple of weeks. We're now able to do 16:9 at 720p on mobile client.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that would be, anyway, finding a way that we can get into a phone, whether it's this or something else, would be transformative, because it just means that we don't have a bunch of other stuff going on to make that work. It's interesting. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand has an interesting one here. In the sci-fi world, for example, The Expanse, you see people walking from room to room and engaging on the screen in a room, and they walk into continuing a conversation on video from a previous physical room they were just in. Is that in Zoom's future?
It might be in our present with the ability to switch devices. There's a little button that you have in multiple different clients that Zoom has to say switch from this to that, or switch from here to there. You can switch from your desktop meeting to your mobile client. That might not be as flashy as the Expanse, but there are some things that we do to try to help you move between devices while you're in the same meeting.
That's great. Next question.
Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota says, I had a webinar and I was not able to manually change the input volume in the settings. When I moved the slider, it would snap back to the far left. Having auto adjust mic volume was the only way I could get the volume up. Blackmagic Design Web Presenter was being used as the mic.
I think that has to do with the device. It assumes that it doesn't have control over the device. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah. So in Zoom, I didn't suppose just Zoom Desktop or Zoom Rooms.
I think he said Zoom.
It says I had a webinar, but it doesn't specify anything else.
Regardless, both of them are exposing the OS level volume control. So basically, if you go into Mac or Windows and you sound devices, get to it right there. That's actually the same control that's just being exposed by the Zoom UI. It's not a software-based control. And so especially like, for instance, if you have an HDMI out on a Mac, there's no volume control on that. It's just pinned. So if you go into Zoom Rooms or Zoom Desktop and try to adjust that and that's selected your speaker, it's not going to let you do it. Same thing on the mic. If the OS doesn't think it has a volume control because there's a separate software utility or something that controls it, Zoom's not going to be able to do it either. So that's the experience you're going to get. It's just going to fly back.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas says, are Zoom Rooms keeping up with the new features of webinar and events?
Zoom Rooms is a little behind our core client team, but they are doing a great job of picking up our features and making sure that they're excellent for the Zoom Room experience. We are looking at doing a beta for Backstage Zoom Rooms in June, and Zoom Events should be supporting Zoom Rooms very soon.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Microsoft Teams is often stuck in the enterprise space. What's the Zoom webinar advantage over Teams?
Sky, do you want to expound on that?
Well, I'm kind of chiming in with Chris's comment earlier that you have given us the jet from LA to New York, and corporate America is saying, and here is your, what did he say? Your covered wagon. And we're expecting you to do the same, but with less money and the expectation. And so I guess it's a selfish question that I want really, you have empowered the masses from a grassroots level. And now that corporate America is coming back in and saying, no, we're going to do it the way we've always done it. I'm really, either you, like Apple, give up on corporate America and just say, we're going to go for the masses, or you, I'm just really encouraging you to help us there. Maybe, I think Nigel's going to help answer some of this too.
Go ahead, Nigel. What did you want to throw in before we throw it to them?
It's just the problem exactly that I'm wrestling with today. So we're an all teams outfit, and I'm continually frustrated by doing, all hands meetings and other tools like that using Teams. And so actually this afternoon I am talking to my Zoom sales rep about, what is it that we can do, not to replace Teams, because I don't think that's going to happen for 50 reasons we can discuss another time, but that I can place this adjacent and use it for specific events and other things. And I appreciate that Zoom team wants Zoom to replace Teams, but I've got to think about adjacency, and I'm struggling to position how to have that conversation. So I don't know if that's additional grist to that mill.
Does that?
Well, we do have integrations with Teams on multiple products, including Zoom Rooms. The ability, I think, maybe Sam or Kat remember more about how this exactly works, but there is an integration system between some of these products. Schedule in Outlook and have the meeting, in Zoom or something like that. So there are some interplays that could be interesting to look at between the architectures, particularly like 365 as an umbrella, right? Which Teams would be, I guess, a component of that. There are integrations where Zoom fits in different parts of that pipeline, and I think the purpose of that is to your exact point. You want to use Zoom in a certain context in your overall business architecture, and that's, I think, what the integrations try to serve.
Yeah, I think that there's little things that I think that Zoom could do a little bit better. Like when I create an event in Zoom, I never allow it to create a calendar event, because if we have a password and you click on the join event, it asks you for the password instead of giving you the link with the password inserted into it. so I always create an event and then cut and paste it carefully into the notes, and not have anything else. Otherwise, people then get, because as a person I hate putting the password in, and so I always very carefully construct this, and that's the kind of thing that Teams just has kind of inserted into it. That's the, like you just click on it and it goes. And with Zoom, you click on it and it goes, and it goes, oh, I need a password. And so it's not an automatic thing. And I think those are the little things that we can shave off to make it easier for someone, so they don't feel like there's an extra bit of friction there. Next question.
Next question comes from Christian Ortiz in South Florida. He says, has Zoom OSC addressed the multi-factor authentication?
The Zoom SDK has implemented something called OAuth 2.0, which is a system that allows you to list the app in the marketplace and then to be able to use OAuth to associate your Zoom account with that SDK application. Apps that already are on the marketplace include Cinemaker, if you're familiar with that one, and that has that very login flow. Again, I can't speak specifically to how it will work for Zoom OSC, but what I can say is that it's a Zoom SDK app, and all SDK apps now moving forward that are going to be using account level login, except for some legacy SSO stuff, are going to be using the OAuth 2.0 flow. So you can make a reasonable inference as to what's going to happen there.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Vieira, Florida. Zoom feature requests, when will Zoom customers be able to vote up FRs on the Zoom community site?
Our Zoom community team is doing an amazing job of building out that site. It was created just last year, so it is still quite new. I know that they're looking into ways for our user base to be able to submit feature requests. So that is a big discussion here at Zoom of how we are able to have those feature requests and be able to triage them in a really excellent way. And so hopefully we'll have some more information for you on that here soon.
Yeah, the challenge with feature request votes, I don't know how it fits in with Zoom, but is a lot of times people have requests that just can't be done or can't be done efficiently. And so having a large number of people, Salesforce started all of this, they put this into a thing called ideas. Give an idea to Starbucks, give an idea to Obama when he's running in 2008. And the number one voted up thing for Obama was marijuana. Legalize marijuana, which is maybe there, but not what they wanted. Not visible. Like in Starbucks, it was like, I want a larger grande. And so the problem with that voting, I'm just saying outside of Zoom, is that people can make requests without understanding the infrastructure or the logistics required to execute that request, and so that becomes the reason that a lot of the stuff doesn't get done as quickly. Next question.
Alex Forty Goldner in London in the UK says, any news on how Zoom will integrate with HR and corporate training systems so that it can be used to make in-house education and maybe a community channel using the structure of Apple Fitness Plus with content that the organization needs to share?
Any thoughts about that, about how to organize that content?
Fascinating. Zoom Events is tackling that a little bit with our hubs solution. So when you create Zoom Events, you have the ability to set up a hub where any recorded material from any events that you've had all live within that one hub location, allowing for that library of resources that you're kind of looking at, I believe, with what that question was asking.
Yeah, I think collaborative. From a perspective of collaboration, there's the new Zoom whiteboard, which has some interesting ways of saving and archiving material. There's also been some updates to Zoom Chat and the way that it integrates with persistent chat from the meeting and things like that, and the way that all that's been set up. So, you can look at it as a constellation maybe of the event structure for the interactive stuff, the chat for persistent communication that you can use to launch meetings, and then the whiteboard for brainstorming, collaboration, hybrid note taking, things like that.
Yeah, I think that from a channel perspective, I think on a large scale, Vimeo does that really, really well. You can go OTT, you can have all kinds of things that people can get, as far as taking that content and putting it somewhere. And then on a smaller area, UStudio is a really, they deal with a lot of kind of more artisanal solutions for lots of big brands. But it would be really interesting to be able to have a place to get to that content, because it is, we do it by putting it on YouTube, but there's not, that's how we handle that, but it is a challenge. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. With Zoom Webinar, can you have two separate hosts stream to YouTube? And if so, how could it be done? I guess church use.
Did you want to ask, Tony? So you just want to be able to go to two different YouTube channels? Is that right?
I want to actually have. First, let me say thank you, Zoom, for houses of worship and schools. Thank you so much. We actually have a small church, but we need to have two separate hosts be able to stream to YouTube. What we're running into, and maybe this is an error on our part, is that only one person can stream to YouTube. I wanted to find out if there was a way for two separate people to be able to launch the Zoom webinar to YouTube, but not just be one email account or one host.
Sure. So live streaming to a third-party platform goes a little bit with the login credentials that you have used both in the client on your device as well as the login on the website that you're using for Zoom. So if you are hosting a webinar from a church account, but you're signed in to a different email address in the Zoom client, when you launch the live stream from the client, it sends a token to the browser that doesn't necessarily match the email address that is the host of the webinar. So definitely be sure that you're logged into the same account that's hosting the webinar and the client. So that way, when you do launch that YouTube live stream, that token is correct. So that way that live stream request can finish processing.
And adding just a little bit on there, for Tony, for yours, the fix can be, as long as those two different people that you want to be able to do it, they're each going to have their own Zoom login. If they are on the same Zoom account, not the same Zoom user, but the same account. If you have, for instance, like a pro account and you have both of them as users under it, or obviously a business or enterprise account or bigger. But that's the trick, is you need them both to be users on the same overall Zoom account. And then they will be able to, if for instance, I scheduled against user A and then user B is an alt host, for instance, or user B joined and I gave them host and then user A left and walked away. User B, if logged in with the Zoom browser to an account that is within that overall Zoom account, will be able to start the stream. If not, what you're probably getting now is there's a message that pops up that says you don't have permission. It's like an error 200 or something. That's going to happen even if you had host abilities in the meeting. If you're logged in with a Zoom account or a Zoom user address that is not within that larger Zoom account, it's not going to let you start that stream for that other hosting user.
And Tony, the way I'd think about it is like a virtual organization, right? So you have individual Zoom accounts, but then you also have the ability to enroll those accounts in an organization, which we would call the Zoom account. So Zoom account kind of can mean two things. It can mean your individual login, but it can also mean the account for which the subscription is associated. So sometimes you'll see people will say, oh, can you add me to your org, inside of Zoom so that I can have access to certain features. And so things like alt hosting and live streaming are part of that umbrella group. So if your church is able to create that umbrella group and enroll the people who need access to that streaming in that organization using their existing Zoom account, you don't have to spin up new login credentials or new accounts. They can use the existing Zoom account, click a button that says, yes, I want to be part of this organization, and then they'll be able to access the organization's live streaming capabilities once they're set up in that ecosystem.
The only thing I'll point out is just if you were to do that and it was to be like, okay, we have these three people who might be running our AV this morning. Great, let's make a church. My team calls them a tenant. A Zoom tenant is my business. Liminal would have had a Zoom tenant, and then Jonathan and Andy and Nolan would have had users inside of that. If your church were to make a Zoom account and then say, great, Tony, what's your personal Zoom account? Let's bring you into our account. That does work, and you can just bring it in, but it's important to note that now the church has a Zoom owner and an admin who now has access to your stuff because you're a user inside their tenant. You're part of their business Zoom account of whatever level. So just do keep that in mind. Know who you're getting in with here.
Right, it can only be enrolled in one at a time.
Yep.
Right, for each email. Yeah, and then, of course, you could theoretically RTMP to something else, right? And then just...
downstream of this, if you needed to go to multiple locations, if we were to read the question in a different way, you could put in the custom URL to Restream or Caster and then send out stems to different places.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, for hybrid events, yes, they are horrible, but does Zoom events have a tool that would let the on-site attendees answer poll questions without logging into a full Zoom session?
Yeah, ouch.
Stay tuned.
Yes, please stay tuned. We're very excited about this feature.
Yeah, that's actually something we've used in the past for a lot of events that we do with them in Makana, is that because it has a cell phone version of it, it just we just merge both communities together all the time. Next question.
A. Mitchell's in Washington up next. Attendees and clients have raised concerns about the license and release agreement in Zoom events tickets being overly broad to the extent of people refusing to attend rather than agree. Might this expand to the webinar products or be fixed somehow?
Ticketing in Zoom events is unique to Zoom events. It does not apply to webinars. So so the concern there of will it extend to webinar? No, webinar doesn't have a ticketing solution. We are, from a Zoom events perspective, looking into more customization options for that registration agreement for hosts, so that they can modify what they need for their event, for their attendee experience. So,
next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles says, is there a way to change the frame rate when recording a Zoom session?
No, but again, I see this question come up a bunch about frame rates in Zoom, and I think there's a misunderstanding. So if I might, I'm going to try to level set a little bit about frame rate in Zoom, right? So you might look at a file, and that's made from a Zoom recording, and it'll list a frame rate, in its properties, but that does not mean that there is a novel frame every time that a frame is generated in that file. Zoom, as part of the architecture, is a variable frame rate architecture. You can verify this for yourself just by opening up the video statistics page. I see people all the time saying that Zoom is like a 24 FPS system. It's not. Some of the recordings that the client generates are sampling that variable frame rate at a constant interval, but that does not mean that every frame that's generated is a novel frame. Or that it has new data, in that next frame. Zoom is constantly playing with time and frame rate to achieve the low latency conversation. And then all the peripheral systems, including things like, Zoom ISO, will sample that will basically look at, what's the incoming data stream look like, and then it will sample at a constant rate, because we know that all the downstream devices need to receive frames on a constant clock. Whereas Zoom, being variable frame rate to achieve the low latency, you might duplicate a frame, you might skip a frame in order to have the right clocking on the downstream services. But it's important to be very clear that Zoom is not a constant frame rate platform, and that everything else is sampling a variable frame rate system.
Yeah. Next question.
Todd Rains in Allen, Texas up next. In Zoom meetings, dual monitor mode, I'd like the second screen to show the gallery. Is this the feature that you might be able to add?
Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you could use a Zoom Room, which would give you 3 galleries, that you could work with if you need it today. But yeah, you're right. The second screen, you can't put anything. You can't multi-spotlight there. You can't multi-pin there. You can't. It's active speaker or screen shared content.
Yeah, it's super hard. It's super hard for a lot of us because we want to put the gallery in a teleprompter, but we want the controls to be in front of us. and the shift of that makes me crazy. Next question.
Sounds like an excellent feature request.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as there's voting, we'll all vote on it all at one time. It's like you'll notice that
the brigade.
Oddly enough, every time someone from Office Hours does it, there's 300 votes. We don't understand. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware up next. Is there a way to improve virtual backgrounds or just push folks to use green screen tech?
Mitchell, did you want to ask something specific about that?
Yeah, there's so many things I love about Zoom that work so well, but I see some horrible virtual backgrounds with people with jello heads flying around and doing weird things. Wouldn't it be better just to push everybody to say, if you want to do that, do it with a green screen because it's going to look so much better. Your green screens are pretty good.
I feel like that's nuanced. Not everyone has the ability to have a well-lit environment or a green screen where they're able to have that perfect look. Some people have to really work with what they've got. The worst virtual backgrounds that I've seen, whereas the automated solution is where the person's in a low light environment where their skin tone is very similar to their wall color. So like, for example, right now, I match my wall pretty well. And so if I had my green screen on, it would not look great because I don't have like a physical thing in my office. So I think for a lot of cases, good enough is okay for people. But yeah, I would like, as people are playing with our technology more, I think, and as we're working on that virtual green screen capability, I'm hoping that we'll be able to make that automated experience even better for low light environments.
And so this is where we need the help of the users as well, right? Of you, the producers, to be able to say that this looks bad and please don't do that. And here is equipment, guidance on lighting, guidance on cameras, microphones, the whole 9 yards. We rely on this communities like this to help Zoom look as good as possible in as many places as possible. So, it's sort of it's a teleconferencing application that we're specializing in production spaces, right? As we build out a more unified communications platform, roll out new features, we are relying on producers to understand what those capabilities are, what looks good, what doesn't, and help educate talent to look as good as possible on the platform.
Hey, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, anytime the topic of quality comes up, I always like to remind people that we as a society used VHS for almost 30 years. People ultimately don't see it. They don't care. They feel it. It needs to be better. But that's why those of us who do care about quality struggle with it, because we see it differently than the rest of the people. Many people are totally still fine with VHS.
The hard part is that, and I'm still trying to get to the bottom of this. I watch trailers. I watch a lot of trailers. I like trailers. I have a very short attention span. That's about the length that I want to watch a movie. And so I watch these trailers, and what's funny is I can tell you within 10 seconds how much money they spent on that movie. And it is like this. Like I look at it and I go, and they'll say like 3 words, and I'll be like 15 million, or 150 million, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Like I've been really digging into this. It feels different. And I can't quite figure out how I know that they didn't spend any money on it. It's a lot of it's sound design. Yeah, but it's so I think that we have to be very careful about the fact that people don't notice it. They still feel a certain way. And I think that obviously we have moved away from virtual backgrounds because I think it's easier, it's more pleasing to the eye, even if it's a gray screen, to watch something that doesn't have the edge crawl, that's there. I mean, like what Andy's using right now is that's our kit. That's what we send out to people. So anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's just sometimes giving people the tools that they can't really use well is more dangerous. Like cookies with machine guns.
I think that the thing that Skype does pretty well is they key it before it goes into the system. And I don't know how Zoom's works because I don't use it very often, but they take whatever feed they have there and they do the key locally, and then they'll send it to the server because then you have a lot more quality to work with. Next question.
Next one comes from Tony Mobley back in Newnan, Georgia. Is there an increase in price for webinar? By the way, Zoom meeting with my small church meeting looks amazing with 720 HD.
Increase is, yeah, go ahead, Kat.
So Webinar is an add-on license that you can purchase. So if you have meetings and that's working well for your church group, Webinar is an add-on that you can then purchase for that type of format that you're looking for, with the panelists, with an audience that can join without being on camera and with being on mute.
Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles notes, Zoom seems to slightly modify the original video source. Does Zoom have an original video setting?
I don't know how that would work.
It'd be so
to be honest
big.
with you, we got to transport this thing at low latency over the, we have to touch it at some point. So also we have to accept a variety of formats, right? So we have, one transport architecture, but a variety of things that we accept. So we have to touch it in some way. I don't know. With raw audio, it's a little easier because there's less, I think, variety. I'm going to get in trouble for this with the audio folks here, but like there's more standardization. There's blocks that you kind of fit into. And original sound is more to do with like, back up for a second. audio stream processing has to do mostly inside of the Zoom client with how are you dealing with echo suppression? How are you dealing with removing, an open speaker from an open mic? How are we dealing with noise suppression? The fan in the background, the dog barking outside, right? Those features. There are features inside of video to allow you to touch up my appearance and things like that, and you can turn those off. So in that, if you read the question in that way, we are always doing original video by default until you enable some of those peripheral features. Whereas with audio, we by default are enabling some audio processing to help the average person have a better teleconferencing experience that you can then turn off and regain the concept of original sound. But at a technical level, it's a different story with the video frames. It has to be transported in a format.
I think a lot of us would love to have something that allows us to double end, just save locally. So I just want everybody, all the computers on this meeting to save their audio and video locally. There's programs like Stream Voodoo that will save to Apple ProRes, while you're talking, to the drive. So that'd be something to be interesting. Next question.
James Haldane, looks like, in Vancouver, Canada, says we have a hybrid meeting coming up and in-room participants want access to the chat. Is there any options for chat only? We do not want them in the Zoom meeting as it can cause audio issues.
I think we talked about that before, so it's watch that space. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer comes right back up from VR Florida with any plan for Zoom to host a custom site for immersive background assets for those of us that make custom immersive backgrounds.
So this is like a marketplace for backgrounds and backsplashes and things like that.
Is immersive background? Is that the one where everyone gets put into the little?
Yeah.
Oh, immersive scenes.
View.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yeah.
I think that anything that has an asset should have a marketplace. So that would. But you can't say anything, I'm sure. So next question.
Ari Black from Tel Aviv, Israel, coming in next. Will it ever be possible to send RTMP directly into Zoom?
Into Zoom? Do you want to receive RTMP as a
stream to it?
I'll take this one since Andy doesn't have it on his roadmap at the moment, I don't think. But the answer is I don't know of it being on the roadmap. Your solution, instead of RTMPing in, is you have to land that video somewhere. It's going to come in as a video participant. At the end of the day, this office hours program, where it hits into Zoom, is coming in as a video participant. That can come in NDI, that can come in HDMI, SDI through a capture card, a deck link, an AJA, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, Zoom only knows about participants in the meeting. I'm a participant. I bring that program view in here. Here on the panelist side, I can see graphics and the meters and all the other things. They're all a participant as far as Zoom is concerned. So at the moment, we don't have anything publicly to say about an RTMP input.
I would say maybe in the meantime, try RTMP mini server, which will receive RTMP and output NDI, and then use a virtual camera to receive the NDI and put it out into the Zoom meeting.
Let's go to the next question.
Ari's right back with another one, this time also from Tel Aviv. Any plans to address the requirement for streaming to multiple destinations directly from Zoom?
What I can say is that you can use a service like Restream or Caster, and then use the custom streaming option inside of the Zoom default streamer and stream to that platform, and then propagate it from there.
For the next question.
L. Wilson Spyro in Berlin says, is it possible to permanently transfer hostship of a repeating meeting to another individual account within the same paid Zoom organization account, or is the creator of a repeating meeting forever Godmin, as it were? Admin Godmin, that's interesting.
Yeah, I love it. So we do have a tool that's called scheduling privilege, where you can create someone as a scheduler for someone else, and that scheduler can move a meeting or a webinar from that host account to a different person's account, whether it's their own account or another person that they can schedule for. Anyone with a paid license on the same account can be listed as a scheduler.
That's great. So to Kat, Sam, Andy, thank you so much for your time. So great to have you guys here. I kind of feel like we need to have you come like once a month, if you're open to it, or maybe once a quarter when there's a new. But we'd love to have you here often. It's really, really great for us to learn directly from the source how it's all coming together. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And thanks to our producers for the great questions. We didn't get to all of them. That's why we need to have these folks back more often, is because it'll just keep stacking up. We were like another 15 or 20 deep when we ended here. So really, really great questions from the producers, and thank you to our panelists. We can't do this without you. And now we're going to jump into after hours.
Do we get to do the whispering now?
Yeah, we can do the whisper, but
yes.
You have to whisper. Yeah, see.
This is the main reason I wanted to come back, so I can whisper the credits.
Mitchell hates the
Andy's whispering on the West Coast now. It sounds different. It's much closer to me. I can hear it.
It sounds way closer.
It's very closer, especially to you.
But Chris doesn't know how to whisper.
I don't.
No, you gotta learn.
I do. I can just turn my mic down.
It's so loud. All right.
Let's get lunch sometime.
We need a breakout room, Chris.
Make it all go away.
Andy, are you going to be in after hours?
It depends.